Hey everyone, what's going on? On August 24th, the major mainstream media story was that the Indianapolis Colts quarterback Andrew Luck announced his retirement. And he's retiring at the age of 29, so it's an early retirement. And it had shocked a number of people because he's so young and he's now retiring. But if you've been following this channel and my videos and my blog, I can't be any more spot on with the narrative that I have been talking about for almost a year now. And if you're new to the channel, check out some links in the description and you'll learn more of what I'm talking about in this video. But every day our media, our sports leagues, our told history, they're all interrelated and they're all scripted. And it also connects to things that are going on in your everyday life if you pay enough attention. Everything in this world is interrelated, and there's an old world knowledge that if you understand, you can see how this really exists. And back in November, I made this video in December, but a lot of the stuff I was talking about in this video was stuff I was documenting about in November. And then I also made this video where I was talking about August 11th and August 10th and a number of things here. And what I talked about in these videos was how I was feeling some negative energy, and it felt like it was trying to divide me and divide this truth community. And it reminded me a lot of the end of 2016 into the beginning or all throughout the year of 2017. And what had happened in that year was, there was a number of things that happened. I'll leave these links in the description, but there was a guy named Monograph who had told Zachary K. Hubbard, and there's a link to his channel in the description, but he told him to watch out for Christmas Eve, and then a car had crashed through his house on Christmas Eve. And that same day, the Colts and the Vikings both got knocked out of the playoffs. And a major thing that was absolutely scripted and coded to everything that was going on was showing us the Colts to be in the Super Bowl. And, they made it seem that Zach was saying it was the Vikings, even though he was leaning more towards the Giants. But they essentially flipped the script. And then after the script was flipped, we learned a new form of gematria that was called reverse gematria, right? What are the odds of this? So they flipped the script, and then around the same time period, we learned that reverse gematria is important. And I was just mentioning how this year seems really important to the same narrative that is going on. And the big dates that we were talking about this year were August 10th and August 11th, because that was Tisha B'Av, the Jewish festival or in remembrance of the destruction of the two temples, and so on. And we're talking about how August 11th and August 10th were important to the construction of the third temple and a number of other things. And in the mix of all this, I mentioned how, more than once, how the Julian calendar seems to be something that we need to pay attention to. Because Julian Edelman was the MVP of the Super Bowl this year. Then we got the Ides of March shooting that we had talked about well in advance, because we had the Austin bomber, whose name was Mark Anthony Condit, and then we had the package bomber, whose name was Caesar Sayoc. Mark Anthony Caesar. It reminds us of the Ides of March when Julius Caesar, the guy who invented the Julian calendar, was assassinated, right? So Julian Edelman. Then we got the Ides of March shooting. Then we had Julian Assange get arrested. So I knew there was something important to the Julian calendar. And now on August 24th, the main story was that the Colts player, think about how that connects to 2016, he announces his retirement. And what's so interesting about August 24th August 24th just so happens to be August 11th on the Julian calendar, this big day that we were talking about like crazy and how it is all connected, right? So Andrew Luck announces his retirement on August 11th on the Julian calendar. So then Zach, he notices this huge connection to Andrew Luck in Houston and the XFL and so on. He talks about all about Houston. Then the next day we get a story about the Houston Floods again. And then the Houston Texans running back named Lamar Miller tears his ACL in the football game, right? So there's a bunch of Houston stuff that is going on with it. Andrew Luck was, a native. He's a native of Houston. And, think about 2016 into 2017. The Super Bowl, Super Bowl 51, just so happened to be held in Houston. And that was a big piece to what we were talking about with Andrew Luck and why it was important, because in gematria, if you write out Andrew Luck, just show you here, Andrew Luck equals 112. So does Super Bowl, but we didn't know this cipher at the time, but Super Bowl equals 112. Houston equals 112. And, there was a number of other things that were going along with it. It was just after the 112th World Series that the Cubs won 1 year and 12 days after Back to the Future Day. And then, Game 7 began on 11/2 and much, much more, But Andrew Luck had this big connection to Houston. I was even talking about this JJ theme that was going on. I think about JJ Watts and whatever with Houston. But just pointing it out, there's all this Houston stuff. And Zach went on to talk about how it's connected to the XFL because, and also the XFL's team called the Houston Roughnecks, right? And then think about Andrew Luck's beard and whatnot, the Roughnecks, the XFL team. But what he mentions is that Andrew Luck's father, Oliver Luck, is the commissioner, I believe, of the XFL. And if you go from his birthday to the day of that retirement, it's 142 days. And if you write out Oliver Luck, it equals 142. And XFL equals 42. And if you write out 42, it equals 142. And he also mentioned how August 24th is Vince McMahon's birthday, right? I'll just show you here Vince McMahon, the guy who runs the WWE, but he also created the XFL. This was his birthday, August 24th, which, remember, is August 11th on the Julian calendar. And a big piece that we were talking about with August 11th, I mentioned how it was important to SummerSlam this year because Hulk Hogan's birthday was August 11th, and at one point in time, Hulk Hogan got his revenge against Earthquake in Philadelphia after Earthquake broke his ribs at the Brother Love show, but he got his revenge in Philadelphia at SummerSlam. And I've been talking about how in the movie Happy Gilmore, he learns how to putt on the Earthquake golf course, and the building that falls over has the black cube on it. And the black cube is representative of the New Jerusalem, where the third temple would be built. So it's all important to this giant narrative, and it fell on Tisha B'Av. The Raptors won the NBA Finals, and then we had SummerSlam this year held in Toronto, where the Raptors play. So, just think about this. Think about how Vince McMahon's birthday on the Julian calendar is August 11th. Hulk Hogan's birthday is the Gregorian August 11th. And what's so interesting about all that Philadelphia stuff that I've mentioned a whole lot, also on August 24th, we had Derek, the creator of this Gematrinator calculator, right? And I'm not talking crap in this video. I'm just pointing out things that I always point out. That even the truth community is coded with this system. It is connected this way. We're all somehow programmed, and these people who are ruling over us, or whatever it truly is, it already knows what's going to happen. Maybe they're doing some type of ritual on all of us, and we don't even realize that we're being somehow being programmed into this ritual, and that's why these things are going on. But, 2016 was absolutely that way. Flip the script, and we learned reverse gematria. Some guy starts a blog mocking my blog, and he refers to me as Nad on the blog, and my name's Dan, so he refers to me as my name in backward reverse. And then, of course, his name equaled 166, reverse gematria equaled 166. My uncle dies in a mysterious car crash on January 14th, just after all of that happened. And that same day, I got a letter that was express shipped in the mail with $300 in it, basically telling me not to do this anymore because, you know, eventually I'm going to need this money because bad things are going to happen and whatnot, right? So I get a letter in the mail the same day. Spent like $25 to ship it to my house. Express ship it. I get it the same day my uncle dies in a mysterious car crash at the Jesuit University. Makes no sense. And moral of the story. So Derek announces this on his YouTube on August 24th, which is August 11th on the Julian calendar. And, you know, it hasn't been a huge deal, but Zach just made a video. I just watched this video. He made it on August 25th, but he's just addressing the things that he didn't like within Derek's interview with the other guy, Pat Leach. And so Zach gets kicked out from going to Anarchadelphia, and then now Derek is going to go. So, you can see how it's creating some type of beef and whatever else, creating some type of division, something in this narrative that I have been talking about since November, how it is reminding me of 2016 and 17, and they're trying to divide us in some weird way. That's why they had like Russian vids make all them videos about Zach's car crash and saying that he showed the G on purpose, and they're trying to make you go against Zach and so on, right? And then now it's kind of the same thing, really. Like, it's creating division on the same day that the Colts player, the team that Zach said would win the Super Bowl, which was a really big thing in that narrative that was going on in 2016. So, the same day Andrew Luck announces retirement, Derek randomly makes this video talking about how he's going to go to Anarchadelphia. And I'm going to show more about some of this stuff in a second, but I just wanted to show you the narrative. I've just been so spot on with this narrative that's going on. But think about Anarchadelphia too, how it's in Philadelphia, and think about how in this video a major piece was about Philadelphia, the Comcast Center, the Black Cube, earthquakes, and, a whole bunch of other things. And actually, we'll just go back and look at this really quick. So it's a perfect day for Derek to go too. Whether he, I don't think he planned it this way or whatever. It doesn't matter. I'm just showing this. So if you go from Derek's birthday to September 13th, it's 101 days. And that's absolutely fitting because in Gematria, if you write out Philadelphia, it equals 101. And if you write out Anarchadelphia, it also equals 101. And Derek's name equals 61, just like how Philadelphia equals 61. So, it makes sense. Makes a lot of sense that Derek would go instead of Zach, does it not? It fits perfectly. And I can't say anything about it because this type of stuff happens to me constantly. And then I document it. Once I notice it, I'm like, hey, look at this, my best friend's brother died in 2003 or whatever it was, 4, can't remember the exact year, but he died on May 11th, and he died in a car called a Saturn. And of course, Saturn equals 511, like May 11th, and many, many other things. I took that car to my very first ever Michigan football game when Michigan beat Houston 50-3, and there was this huge narrative with Houston yet again, right? And I'm just bringing this up because I talked about all this in 2017 and how it was important to Houston And I thought possibly the Rockets were going to win the NBA Finals that year, but the Rockets didn't, but the Astros went on to win the World Series. And I'm just wondering if it's now time for the Rockets to finally win the NBA Finals. Because I just recently talked about how, in July I talked about how Dwight Howard was really important to the reason DeMarcus Cousins was going to the Lakers. Then DeMarcus Cousins gets injured, and then Dwight Howard ends up going to the Lakers because of DeMarcus Cousins getting injured. And he goes there on Kobe Bryant's birthday of all days, you know. And the big thing with Dwight Howard and DeMarcus Cousins was that he tore his Achilles, and it was synced up to when Kobe Bryant tore his Achilles the same year that Dwight Howard played for the Los Angeles Lakers. And it's also the reason that the Toronto Raptors won the NBA Finals, because it was synced up to Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant once scored 81 points against the Toronto Raptors. Kobe being Bryant equals 81. DeMarcus Amir Cousins equals 81. When he tore his Achilles, he came out of the game with 8.1 seconds left. And when Kobe returned after tearing his Achilles, he returned to play the Toronto Raptors on Dwight Howard's birthday, And before that, they were supposed to get Chris Paul, and Chris Paul, that trade was annulled on Dwight Howard's birthday. And then, there's a number of other things. Dwight Howard left to go to the Houston Rockets. Mike D'Antoni was the Lakers coach at the time. He left to go to the Houston Rockets. Think about how Chris Paul eventually went to the Houston Rockets. And, much more. I'm gonna bring that up in a little bit, but I don't know, there's something really interesting about it. Derek always talks about the total solar eclipse that equals 202. This Anarchadelphia is going to happen during the harvest moon that equals 202. I talked about how my name equaled 202. Zach's birthday is the 202nd day of the year. I was born 8 months and 11 days exactly before Zach. Then we talked about end of the world and San Francisco being important. Red heifer equals 202. Oddly enough, the cipher that I've been saying is really important to this year is the Francis Bacon ciphers. And it makes total sense, Francis Bacon, the guy who supposedly wrote the King James Bible, and the G in Francis Bacon equals 33, which is important too. Freemasonry, King James a Freemason, so many other things. So Pat Leach, his name equals 202 in one of these Francis Bacon ciphers. I just put FB, it's one of them 4 ciphers. So it's just really interesting. There's something important to that moon I've been saying. The harvest moon. That's why Neil Young's wife died earlier this year, because he has that song called Harvest Moon. And Donald Trump, even when he announced that he was going to run for president or whatever, and he came down the elevator, he was listening to Rockin' in the Free World by Neil Young. All of that was important to what I was talking about 2016 with the Native American theme and the Indians being in the World Series. So that's why, it was even important to the death of Prince. And then the Indianapolis Colts owner, Jim Irsay, he bought Prince's Yellow Cloud guitar. And then it was all synced up to the area I live in and the death of the Omaha Indian named Chief Yellow Smoke, who died in this town. And they were going to come kill the town, and then the Freemasons saved the town, and much, much more, But I want to show even more that this is connected to what I was talking about in 2016. The Super Bowl this year is going to be played in Miami. And notice the player who got hurt the other night for the Houston Texans. His name's Lamar Miller, and he had originally played for the Miami Dolphins, of all teams, and his name equals 114 and 166 in Francis Bacon. And remember, my uncle gave me this Miami Dolphins jersey just before he died, and I had no idea where I got it from. And I later found out at the Gold Slipper that he gave me this jersey. And if you read out the gold slipper, it equals 166. And then I asked my mom what his birthday was because I was curious when his birthday was because there was this synchronicity stuff going on. And my mom told me his birthday was July 23rd. And the day that I asked her just so happened to be 166 days after his birthday. And then, of course, his name equaled 166 in gematria. And his wife was named Betty, and his name was Barney, reminding us of the Flintstones. They even did a Flintstones-themed wedding back in 1980. And the Flintstones only aired 166 episodes. What are the odds of that, right? And they were based off of a TV show called The Honeymooners. If you write out Honeymooners, that equals 166. And then reverse gematria equaled 166. Then the guy named Montegraph who told Zach to watch out for Christmas Eve, he made a video in April, 166 days after my birthday, and he was talking about to watch out for the number 166. This big number that I was talking about like crazy, and then all of a sudden he makes a video 166 days after my birthday, talking about watching out for the number 166. Then later that night on the Gematria Effect, some lady named Mary Toffelmeyer, whose name equaled 166, called in and said that she was his latest victim, and he was trying to kill. Someone came to her house and was trying to kill her pet pig. And the interesting thing about that was my daughter had just went to bed, and she had gave me these two stuffed animal pet pigs. She told me they were her pets, and then I need to watch her pet pigs while she went to bed because it was bedtime. And then this lady starts talking about how they're going to kill her pet pig, and I'm sitting next to these two pet pigs, and of course the word pigs equals 166 in Jewish gematria, right? 166. So I knew there was something super important to that. And this year currently just so happens to be a Chinese pig year. And think about all of the recent stuff that's going on with China, right? The tariffs, the trade war, the Hong Kong stuff. Once again, think about the Houston Rockets with this narrative. When DeMarcus Cousins tore his Achilles, he did it against the Houston Rockets. And when he first played his first game with the Pelicans, he played against the Houston Rockets. And in 2017, Houston and the Pelicans played an exhibition game, two exhibition games in China. And when that happened, one of the players for the Houston Rockets named Bobby Brown, he graffitied on the Great Wall of China. Think about that with Donald Trump, the wall, the Great Wall, and much, much more, right? So there's all of this stuff with Houston and how it's important. Also think about Houston, who had Yao Ming, right? The Chinese player, Yao Ming. What are the odds of that? And then they also, at one point in time, had Jeremy Lin. And I can't even remember, did Jeremy Lin, I know I wrote it in here. Jeremy Lin played, he was on the Toronto Raptors this year. And then he made this deal about how he's being disrespected because he's Chinese or whatever, right? And his birthday just so happens to be Kobe Bryant's birthday as well. But the year that Kobe tore his Achilles, I'm trying to think here. Yeah, Jeremy Lin played for the Rockets when Kobe tore his Achilles. And then he went to the Lakers a few years later. And he also played with Carmelo Anthony on the New York Knicks, who were coached by Mike D'Antoni, who coaches the Houston Rockets, right? Who coached the Lakers when Kobe tore his Achilles, when Dwight Howard was on the team. And Mike D'Antoni even said that the reason he left New York was because of Carmelo Anthony. And think about the recent news stories about how Carmelo Anthony is being blackballed by the NBA. And the last team that Carmelo Anthony played for was the Houston Rockets, with Mike D'Antoni being the head coach and so on, right? I mean, so there's this humongous narrative and how it's synced up to China with Houston. And, China's even important to the space symbolism with Houston. Earlier, the same day that, I believe it was the same day that Donald Trump addressed the nation about building the wall. Actually, it wasn't. It was like 3 days before. we got a story about China landing on the dark side of the moon, you know? So China's space program is being ramped up. China equals 35, NASA equals 35, King James equals 35. That's why it was important that in 2017, Kevin Durant wore the number 35. There was this big ritual with, I can't remember how exactly it happened, right around the time that Eugene Cernan had died, you know, the last guy to walk on the moon. And in November that year, I was talking about how there was a space moon theme, and we got the death of John Glenn. And I was talking about it in regards to Neil Armstrong and Eugene Cernan. And then a month later, Eugene Cernan died. And I talked about how it was important to Don Rickles roasting him. And then 3 months later, Don Rickles died. You know, I don't understand how it's crazy. I mean, I'm not trying to complain, but it is odd that I have like 0 subscribers with as many things that I have talked about that happen, you know, within a short amount of time after it, you know. Mentioning the weirdest thing about how Denmark is connected to my life and there's something important to Denmark, and then what? 2 days later, Donald Trump tries to buy Greenland from Denmark. You know, what are the odds of that stuff? And I'm fed up with some people. You know, there's some people who follow this work and they don't think for themselves, and they think that all of this stuff can't be organic. And there's for sure people who are ruling over us with this knowledge, but this knowledge is so much bigger, and we're not gonna fix this world by storming the White House and by killing all the Freemasons and the Jesuits and whatever else. We need to figure out how this system works, and I've been saying that forever. You know, it's not going to do any good if we go storm the White House. They already know that's going to happen. That, you know, it's just like how this just recently happened, connected to August 11th. Then Derek's going to Anarchadelphia, kind of creating some division. Andrew Luck of the Colts now all of a sudden is, you know, retiring on this same day. You know, it's bigger than just people sitting around scripting sports and scripting the media. Even though I truly think that is going on, because, you know, why else would you get a stupid ass story about Alicia Olive and the Cook brothers surviving the garlic shooting, you know, and then we get the El Paso shooting, reminding us of old El Paso. Then we get a Ned Peppers shooting in Dayton, Ohio, you know, and then what? One of the we got a story about one of the victim's sons, whose name was Derek Fudge, all about food, right? And think about the garlic shooting with China, right? China is the leading producer of garlic, you know, so there's something really important to China in all of this and the mix of what is going on here. So, you know, the same day too, the same day that Dwight Howard went got signed with the Lakers on Kobe Bryant's birthday, we got the story about Luke Walton, who is the Kings coach now, who resigned from the Lakers on the anniversary of Kobe Bryant tearing his Achilles. That same day on Kobe Bryant's birthday, Luke Walton's sexual assault case got dropped. And that case lasted for 4 months and 1 day. And Kobe Bryant equals 41. And Kobe Bryant turned 41 years old the same day this case got dropped. Remember, Kobe at one time retired by supposedly writing the poem called Dear Basketball that equals 41. You know, it's just absolutely stupid. The word king equals 41 in Gematria. So it makes me wonder if it's just important to LeBron James still. All of this king symbolism. Mike D'Antoni as a player even was drafted by the Omaha, Kansas City Kings. So there's something important to the king symbolism, how it syncs up to China on the wall. Remember when Isaiah Thomas's sister died? She died in a Toyota Camry that looked exactly like my girlfriend's car, and I was talking all about this king symbolism synced up to the Houston Rockets. Then Isaiah Thomas loses his tooth, and that same tooth earlier in the year my girlfriend also lost. And then his sister dies days before in a car that looks exactly like the one that my girlfriend drives. the word Camry means crown, right? And then so does Stephen, and then the Stephen Curry went on to win the NBA Finals over the King. But what I find interesting too is that in that year, that was the year that my girlfriend was pregnant, and she was pregnant, had a miscarriage, and then ended up getting pregnant again right away. And that's when I was talking all about this rocket symbolism and how it was important. And I've been saying how this Francis Bacon cipher is absolutely important to what's going on this year. There's something important to France. Think about Francis and Franks and Pope Francis and much, much more. But and then Bacon and the pig year. But I was looking at it and I noticed that rockets equal 117 in this cipher. So does the word space. So does Apollo. And think about the moon landings. They were on the Apollo missions. And these all equal 91 as well. And that's important too. The Cold War and space and missiles and so on, right? The Cold War came to an end in the year, or the Soviet Union dissolved in the year 91. But it's funny that all of these equal 117. And later that year, my son was born on January 17th. My girlfriend's name equals 117. Her daughter's born 117 days before her birthday. And, there was other stuff that was connected. My grandma had died just before my son was born. She died 1 month and 17 days before my birthday. And I'm just showing, it's 117. It's funny that the rockets equal 117 and Francis Bacon. Something I never noticed back then. And there's something that I'm supposed to learn with this knowledge after August 10th and 11th. I knew it would be, but I'm really starting to think that it's just this Francis Bacon cipher is important. And possibly there's just we got the four ciphers, or the two main ones even. Maybe there's a reason that, hopefully I'm going to learn when these ciphers are important. There's so many different ciphers, which I hate people doing with no rhyme or reason. They're just using 50 different ciphers and then saying that there's this narrative that they're creating. That's not what I really do on here. You know what I mean? I want there to be a specific reason that you're using these ciphers. And it makes the most sense to me. And I have a lot of people who reach out to me and I don't understand what they're saying because I'm just seeing how many ciphers there are and how it's too confusing to explain to somebody that it exists. Like if the narrative is there before the gematria even. So if you see the narrative and then you see that they're connected, I try to use the least amount of ciphers as I possibly can. But it's not to say that they're not important, but there needs to be a time and a place when they are important, and maybe when they're not so important, and you need to know a narrative of why they are important and at what point they are important, if that makes sense. And I really think the Francis Bacon ciphers are something that need to be really paid attention to in the next year or so. But I know this is all over the place, but the reason I was bringing all that up was because the Anarchadelphia, it falls over the harvest moon, but it also falls on the anniversary of Francis Scott Key writing the national anthem. It's the 205th anniversary. Israel equals 205. So does Philadelphia and Jewish gematria. And my girlfriend's pregnant again, and the due date just so happens to be September 14th. And I'm interested to see what happens. I wonder if we're going to have it on September 5th, just for the fact that that's the day that leaves 117 days in the year. And my name and my full name equal 95. It would just seem so fitting for the baby to be born on that day. But now that I've said it, it probably won't happen, because that seemingly seems to happen. If I don't tell anybody about stuff and I just think about it, then it always seems to happen. So whenever I tell somebody, it's always something different, it feels like. But Still doesn't defeat the fact that it's coded, but look at these Francis Bacon ciphers here. So with Andrew Luck here, he announces his retirement, and I go on to mention how it's connected to 2016 and the Super Bowls in Miami. It was also important to Teddy Bridgewater and the Vikings, right? Teddy Bridgewater got injured on what? He got knocked out by LaMarcus Joyner on Sam Bradford's birthday. And, it was all about the Rams. And, Sam Bradford was a Ram. Case Keenum was a Ram. There's this big Ram symbolism. Then the Rams just won the Super Bowl. But Teddy Teddy Bridgewater was from Miami. I talked about how it was synced up to the Nebraska Cornhuskers that year in Super Bowl V that was held in Miami, where the Colts won. And that was in the Orange Bowl on January 17th of the year 71. And it was also the year that Nebraska won its first championship in the year 71 on New Year's Day. They even won with 17 points, the reflection of 71. Nebraska equals 71. And Nebraska synced up to Colin Kaepernick kneeling and so on because they somehow got a bowl game in 2015, I believe it was, at the Foster Farms Bowl, and they played in Levi's Stadium, and Moses was in the tribe of Levi, and so on. That's why all of the kneeling stuff was important, because Moses was in the tribe of Levi. Moses freed the slaves. Think about Lincoln, Nebraska, Abraham Lincoln freeing the slaves, and so on. But what I never noticed before was that Miami also equals 71 in this Francis Bacon cipher. And to put it even more into perspective, if you read out Andrew Luck in Francis, one of them ciphers, it equals 222. August 10th was really important. That's the 222nd day of the year. Nebraska Cornhuskers equal 222. Orange Bowl equals 222 in Francis Bacon ciphers. Teddy Bridgewater equals 222 in the Francis Bacon ciphers. Super Bowl equals 222 in the Francis Bacon ciphers. And Andrew Luck just so happened to retire. 5 months and 9 days are also 162 days before the Super Bowl this year. And in Francis Bacon gematria, Miami, Florida equals 162, where the Super Bowl is going to be held. And Andrew Luck equals 59. So his retire is all synced up to, the Super Bowl this year. And then he's all of these other interesting connections that I would have never understood without knowing Francis Bacon gematria. So I think that is the narrative. There's something with Francis Bacon and the Francis Bacon ciphers. It's interesting if you write out Francis Bacon too, just pointing it out with Teddy Bridgewater playing for the Saints, and the Saints also have that like the biggest bridge over water or something like that. Can't remember it all. But Francis Bacon in the Francis Bacon ciphers just so happens to equal 208. Francis Bacon and Frank Baconis. And if you write out New Orleans Saints, it equals 208. So just something interesting, especially with as much as I've talked about France and, French Louisiana and so on. It's interesting Teddy Bridgewater plays there. So just pointing that out. I don't know. The Vikings are another team that I haven't seen anything with the Vikings yet, but since it was the narrative from 2016 was all about the Vikings and the Colts and how they lost on Christmas Eve, and they both had an 8-8 record. And didn't they both lose like with 25 points, or they both lost by 25 or something like that? And then the Super Bowl was on 2-5, and it was all about the number 25, everything that went in there, Falcons equal 25, and much, much more. I can't remember it all, a whole bunch of 25 stuff, but the Vikings are interesting with all of that Scandinavian stuff I've been documenting about, right? Scandinavia, think about the Vikings. So, interesting. Something connected there. We just got that story about the the ex football player who got murdered by his son too, and he played for the Vikings, and he wasn't he from Minneapolis, so maybe that was part of the coding. Maybe that was something to do with what was going on with the Vikings and the Colts. I never really looked into that story that I'm thinking about it, so but maybe there'll be some more coming up. Houston, Texas equals 233 in Francis Bacon, just like Houston Roughnecks, just like Luck. That's the 51st prime number. Think about Super Bowl 51 that was important in 2016-17. WWE 51, Houston Texans 51. Remember how Lamar Miller got injured? Lamar Miller equals 51. In regards to space and Houston and the moon landing, in this coming year, 2020, it'll be the 51st anniversary of the moon landing. And the word moon equals 51. The word conspiracy equals 51. Area 51, right? Lubbock Lights 51. The Habited 51. Lots of interesting things with that. Tinfoil hat. You know, reptilians equal 51. I think gray aliens even equals 51. Or gray alien equals 51. Definitely an interesting thing to think about there. 51. Also with the king symbolism, there's been more than one occasion where there's been a story about Donald Trump being the king. And I always think about how it's connected to Queen Elizabeth and whatnot. But we recently got a story called Call Him King Trump. And we got a story a long time ago on Time Magazine with Donald Trump looking in the mirror and he was the king. We got that story on Mike Pence's birthday. So there's something important to it. I also talked about the book of Daniel and the four kings, and the fourth king was the richest king, and he stirred up the nation. He stirred up the north against the south, I believe it was. And then the next king was the one where all the bad stuff started happening. So it's just interesting. Trump, the richest president, you know. That's why Isaiah Thomas was important too, because his nickname was the King in the North. Then his sister died. He was all synced up to the Houston Rockets stuff. This story was about the prime minister in Denmark, and I just wondered, I wonder about the queen or the king in Denmark, and this is the queen of Denmark right now, Marguerite II, and her name equals 262 in this Francis Bacon cipher. And if you follow what I've said, 919 seems to be a very significant date with a lot of the royal symbolism and whatnot. The word queen equals 26 and 62, a lot like 262. That's why the marathon coding was so important with Nipsey Hussle and, a bunch of stuff because a marathon is 26.2 miles. 919 is the 262nd day of the year, and much, much more. Maybe I'll find the video in the description, but it's interesting that this lady's name equals 262. She's a queen, something that I've been documenting a lot about with Queen Elizabeth and whatnot. Also in Jewish gematria, if you write out Vince McMahon, his name equals 919. So, trying to think, what day would that be on the Julian calendar? Be 9 plus 4. So it'd be September 6th. No, not 6th. September 8th. So that'd be 13 days difference. 13. I can't even think right. Be the 9 minus 3. Yeah, it'd be the 6th. So, who knows? That's an interesting day too, 9-6. But saw Zenith of the Alpha pointed out something too about how 919 is 616 upside down, and That's interesting too, because some people believe the actual mark of the beast is 616, and 919 this year is Pope Francis's 6 year, 6 month, and 6 day being the Pope. So moral of the story, I'm just saying, like, things are going on. There wasn't the destruction of the Golden Gate Bridge or anything like that, but it's all symbolic. There is a reason that a lot of these things are happening and going on. It's all intricately planned. There's it's just craziness. And I mean, I've been spot on with so many things going on recently. Like even today, tonight, I guess we got a story about Taylor Swift basically being the best at the VMAs, and it was more like a Taylor Swift concert than it was VMAs and whatnot. And this is her first performance since 2015. And if you followed all the stuff I was talking about with August 10th, that was synced up to Donald Trump, or Slipknot playing at the Iowa State Fair and so on, it was synced up to when Kanye West visited the White House last year. And then in November, we got Slipknot tickets being released on the same day Bohemian Rhapsody, the film, came out. And in 2015, there was this big narrative with Freddie Mercury and the death of Freddie Gray and how it synced up to the Civil War and Freddy Krueger. And the day of the VMAs in 2015, we got the death of Wes Craven, right? And I talked about how they were synced up to the Queen symbolism with Kanye West going up on stage and Beyonce and Taylor Swift. Equal the same as Queen Elizabeth II, and they referred to her as the Queen of the VMAs. And Freddy Krueger is played by Robert Englund. And Robert Englund was best friends with Mark Hamill, who's Luke Skywalker. And when Corey Taylor called out Kanye West for saying he was the greatest rock star of all living rock star, he was wearing the Star Wars shirt. And now today on CNN, after the VMAs, CNN gives us this story about Taylor Swift calling out the White House, reminding us of when Kanye West visited the White House. And at the 2015 VMAs, Kanye West also said that he was going to run for president in the year 2020. And right next to it is a story about the movie Skywalker that is going to be released on December 20th this year. Right? The movie, what is it? Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker. And the whole story was about this main character named Daisy Ridley, her real name, and how she might turn to the dark side. If you go from her birthday to the day this movie comes out, it just happens to be 8 months and 10 days. What are the odds of that? Or a span of 8 months and 11 days. You can't even make that up. And I'm trying to think here. I also pointed out that Lucasfilms is now owned by Disney, and Disney's been really important. And I even talked about how I went to the JoJo Siwa concert earlier this month, and just before I went, we got the death of Minnie Mouse, right? Minnie Mouse, famous for wearing the bow in her hair, just like JoJo Siwa, and I talked about how it was important to. She's like the new Hannah Montana, and I even was talking to my girlfriend about how Hannah Montana was way worse than Lizzie McGuire, and we had this big conversation about it. And now Disney's releasing a reboot of Lizzie McGuire on Disney Plus. I don't know what day, that August 24th is when I put it in here. I don't know when it actually, August 23rd, but Disney Plus comes out 82 days after this story. Lizzie McGuire equals 82. Hilary Duff, who is Lizzie McGuire, she's 31 years old, but she'll be 32 when the show comes out. Disney equals 31 and 32. And then what happened to Hannah Montana? Miley Cyrus just recently in the news for getting a divorce or whatever, separating from that Liam guy. And that Liam guy was important to why I was talking about Denmark. So it's just so stupid. Just trying to see here. There's a story about Donald Trump and the chopper. course, Donald Trump, Iowa State Fair, helicopter. Donald Trump equals the same as helicopter. Chopper equals 215. The wall symbolism stuff has a lot to do with 215. I got a YouTube strike on 215. The Saturday Night Live stuff, where I talked about was synced up to Ross Perot and Dana Carvey in Wayne's World and the Aurora shooting, and then we got the death of Ross Perot a few months later. So, once again, the Francis Bacon ciphers are important to that. Francis, like, they're seriously really important. Even, like, I showed, like, Dale Earnhardt and his plane crash and whatever with Napoleon on Napoleon's birthday and whatnot. I mean, NASCAR equals 111 and also 82. And the guy who founded NASCAR, Bill France, his name equals 82 in the non-Francis Bacon ciphers. And he died 111 days before his birthday, or after his birthday, one or the other. And Dale Earnhardt equals 111. I mean, earlier this year, the death of J.D. Gibbs on January 11th. It was synced up to Denny Hamlin on the number 11 car. Winning the Daytona 500, he died on the 11th day and so on. But what are the odds that NASCAR equals 111 and 82? I mean, there's just been so many examples of why Francis Bacon gematria is important this year. The Big Bang Theory. We got a major story about the Big Bang Theory surpassing Cheers on 328 this year. Notice the Big Bang Theory equals 328. So countless examples that I have shown on here why Francis Bacon is important. So I'm definitely keeping my eye on Francis Bacon gematria. Also, the Julian calendar is really important. So I'm gonna, like I said, keep my eye on some of this stuff. We'll see what happens. Hopefully, there isn't this big problem between Derek and Zach and whatever else. We don't need, I don't know. We'll see what happens. We don't need a bunch of division that was purposely created, It's just obvious. Somehow they know how to manipulate us, whether we can see it or not. They are somehow programming us just as well as they are programming the rest of the world by believing their bullshit news stories and whatever else. So, and there's absolutely people who understand this knowledge and use it. And I have a billion examples of people who I thought were genuine, and then it turns out they were just some type of troll. And I'm not going to go into detail, but there's a ton of different examples of weird experiences that I've had, and death threats, and among other things. So I'm just going to leave it there. But have a good one. Peace. I really need to get some sleep, so.